picture this. You're scrolling through Instagram at 11 p.m., and there it is, that perfect family photo. A glowing sunrise, kids gathered around a crackling campfire, dad leading morning devotions while the children prepare freshly caught fish. The caption reads, "Our annual 2-week camping trip is the highlight of our year." Grateful for laughter, memories, and pure joy. And suddenly, that familiar weight drops into your stomach. Our family barely does devotions. We don't create these magical experiences. My kids are probably damaged from too much screen time. Welcome to the world of social guilt, that invisible prison where millions of us live, convinced we're somehow failing at the most basic human experiences. I'm your host, Beatrice Goodwin, and this is yet another episode on The Social Lens. Today we're diving deep into one of the most pervasive yet misunderstood emotions plaguing our modern world. Social guilt isn't just feeling bad about something you've done wrong. It's far more insidious than that. It's the voice that whispers, you're fundamentally flawed, undeserving, and morally deficient, not because of your actual actions, but because of how you measure up to an impossible standard created by others. Let's start with the uncomfortable truth. Wherever guilt arises, it often reduces to the same disempowering narratives. I am a bad person. I have done something wrong. I deserve punishment. But social guilt? It takes this internal torment and amplifies it by linking your personal inadequacy to the perceived judgments, expectations, and comparisons with others. Here's what's truly sinister about social guilt. It convinces you that your unhappiness is justified, that your suffering is a natural consequence of failing to meet external or socially constructed standards. It acts as a self-reinforcing mechanism, keeping you trapped in cycles of negativity and self-reproach that serve absolutely no one. Think about the last time you felt guilty about something social. Maybe you didn't host that perfect dinner party, or your house wasn't Pinterest-worthy when friends came over, or you weren't as demonstrative with affection as other parents seemed to be. What happened next? Did visible guilt actually signal atonement to anyone? Did it solve the problem? The devastating reality is this. When someone believes they've wronged another or fallen short of societal expectations, they often assume that visible guilt will signal accountability. But this rarely occurs. The person experiencing social guilt endures emotional weight, shame, and self-criticism, while others simply encounter a tense, withdrawn, or irritable individual. Social guilt perpetuates internal suffering without delivering any perceived corrective benefit. You're essentially punishing yourself for failing to meet standards that may not even be real, valid, or achievable. Now let's talk about how this prison gets built, brick by brick. In every facet of life, the distinctions among individuals, ranging from temperaments and life situations to abilities and personal beliefs, profoundly affect the development of guilt feelings. False guilt tends to take root in the unhealthy ground of perpetual comparison to others. A mother might feel guilty for not naturally being demonstrative in her affection toward her children because she's comparing herself to the mom who seems to effortlessly shower her kids with hugs and praise. A business person might harbor guilt because a coworker's proficiency with emails seems unmatched. A husband might believe he's inadequate for not excelling at home repairs like his neighbor. Teenagers often feel guilty for not possessing the social skills that seem second nature to their peers. Some people who are highly emotional may yearn for a calmer disposition, while those who tend to be stoic might secretly wish they were more sensitive. The irony: we're all looking at each other's highlight reels and comparing them to our behind-the-scenes footage. But here's where it gets really interesting and really damaging. People who are introspective often receive the confident and firm opinions of others as judgments. The reaction can vary dramatically. Individuals with a sensitive conscience might internalize these judgments and form desolate self-assessments like, "I am failing because I don't take my kids camping." Conversely, those with a stronger sense of self might externalize the judgment, perceiving the other person as superior. She believes she's better than everyone else because of her family's camping trips. Notice what's happening in both scenarios? Social guilt contributes to a repeating cycle of comparison, judgment, and envy. This cycle compels individuals to seek validation or superiority as a way to alleviate feelings of inadequacy, which only feeds the beast. If social comparison was dangerous before the internet, social media has turned it into a weapon of mass psychological destruction. Let me tell you about Asina O'Neill, a story that perfectly illustrates how digital platforms have become guilt manufacturing machines. By 18, Asina was utterly exhausted and disillusioned by the world of social media influencing. The burden of maintaining a false image of perfection had worn her out. In a decisive move, she wiped out hundreds of her Instagram posts in a single day. For the post she retained, Asina updated the captions to expose the reality behind her facade. That beach photo in the bright pink bikini? The new caption read, "Not real life. Took over 100 photos in similar poses, trying to make my stomach look good. Would have yelled at my little sister to keep taking them until I was somewhat proud of this." Another picture in running shorts got this update. A 15-year-old girl that calorie restricts and excessively exercises is not goals. She revealed that many seemingly spontaneous posts were actually strategically planned sponsorship deals, complete with photo staging and editing techniques designed to appear as thin and radiant as possible. Psychological research has confirmed what Asina discovered firsthand. Exposure to idealized images devastates self-perception. Studies show that viewing aspirational images correlates with lowered self-esteem. Teenagers who compare themselves to online influencers experience heightened depressive symptoms. Adult women who frequently edit and filter their selfies develop more negative self-images and increased self-consciousness. Every unattainable standard we encounter on social media introduces another potential source of anxiety and guilt. Whether it's a perfectly styled outfit, an impeccably decorated home, or that perfect family camping trip, each unreachably perfect image contributes to feelings of inadequacy. The pursuit of keeping up with the digital Joneses is futile because they don't represent real people. They're carefully curated fronts designed to keep us preoccupied, distracted, and insecure. These insecurities, in turn, make us more driven consumers and more profitable targets for advertisers. But social guilt isn't just about individual psychology or digital manipulation. It's deeply embedded in the fabric of society itself. Guilt is a higher-order cognitive emotion shaped more by societal expectations than by individual preference. When you feel social guilt, you're not just responding to your own moral compass, you're responding to an internalized version of your community's judgment. This is why the same behavior that might cause crushing guilt in one culture barely registers in another. What one group considers acceptable behavior may be deemed unethical by another, shaping the intensity and focus of social guilt. This makes guilt a socially regulated emotion. We internalize collective expectations and use them to judge ourselves, often linking self-worth to compliance with external standards rather than authentic values. Consider how this plays out in something as fundamental as sexuality. When we examine guilt through a sociological lens, it becomes evident that the guilt associated with female sexual power is widespread among women, transcending individual family dynamics. This indicates that the root isn't simply found in familial relationships, but is deeply entrenched in societal norms. These norms often condition women to suppress their power to ease the insecurities of sexually self-conscious men. The belief that men are threatened by direct expressions of female sexuality becomes a rational response to societal pressures, pressure on men to maintain control, and on women to diminish their influence to avoid threatening male dominance. But this isn't just about gender dynamics. Every social role comes with its guilt-inducing expectations. Parents feel guilty for not being Pinterest perfect. Employees feel guilty for not being available 24/7. Students feel guilty for not being naturally brilliant. The elderly feel guilty for requiring care. The young feel guilty for inexperience. These feelings stem not only from dysfunctional family dynamics, but from social influences embedded within family structures. Societal challenges, including economic insecurity, media violence, unfulfilling work environments, and environmental degradation, profoundly impact parental well-being and influence family dynamics. As the social world places increasing pressure on its inhabitants, families face compounded challenges that foster pathogenic beliefs during a child's development. Let's get specific about what social guilt actually does to your brain and body. Unlike basic emotions like joy or disgust, guilt persists over time and can interfere with well-being, sometimes suppressing immune responses and promoting chronic stress. This isn't just emotional discomfort, it's measurable physiological damage. Attribution theory explains that individuals prone to social guilt often blame themselves for negative outcomes and generalize these failures to their character. This creates a feedback loop of internal conflict and self-reproach that becomes increasingly difficult to escape. When someone is predisposed to social guilt, they engage in what psychologists call upward social comparison, constantly measuring themselves against those who appear more accomplished or higher in status, using perceived success as a measure of their own inadequacy. This tendency to always look to those seemingly above us erodes contentment and self-acceptance. The cruel irony? There will always be someone out there who seems to be doing better in some way. Constantly seeking comparisons is a recipe for perpetual dissatisfaction. Research indicates that people who frequently engage in upward social comparison are more prone to burnout and depression. But here's a crucial insight. Social guilt often clouds judgment, transforming minor missteps into magnified failures. When guilt becomes the lens through which we view our actions, we lose the ability to accurately assess whether we've actually done anything wrong, whether any real harm occurred, and whether our response is proportionate to the situation. Now, for one of the most important revelations about social guilt, it's often weaponized by others. Social guilt is further reinforced when responsibility is projected externally. Certain individuals may, consciously or unconsciously, provoke guilt to elicit reactions or maintain influence, exploiting sensitivity to social judgment. Those prone to anxiety or people-pleasing tendencies are particularly vulnerable. Analytical and empathetic tendencies actually magnify self-recrimination, making some people perfect targets for guilt manipulation. But here's the key insight that can change everything. No one can impose guilt without consent. Social guilt persists only when individuals allow external pressures to dictate internal judgment. Think about the people in your life who seem to have a special talent for making you feel guilty. Maybe it's a family member who sighs dramatically about how some people never call. Maybe it's a friend who makes passive-aggressive comments about how busy you've been. Maybe it's a colleague who somehow always makes you feel like you're not working hard enough. These people often operate from their own insecurities and need for control. They've learned that triggering guilt in others is an effective way to get attention, compliance, or emotional labor. But their power depends entirely on your participation in the guilt game. So how do we break free from this prison? Releasing the grip of social guilt isn't a matter of instant decision, but a gradual process requiring awareness, reflection, and self-compassion. First, understand that feeling better can actually provoke anxiety in those conditioned to equate guilt with moral obligation or self-worth. Deep-seated social guilt convinces the mind that happiness is unearned, that being content is a form of transgression. Consequently, negative emotions can feel safer and more familiar than relief or joy. Progress lies in acknowledging guilt, examining its sources, and differentiating between productive remorse and socially imposed or exaggerated guilt. This requires critical reflection on actions with specific questions. Was the harm caused deliberate or a result of fear, ignorance, or personal need? Was the outcome accidental or influenced by circumstances beyond control? Is the perceived wrongdoing truly significant, and by whose standards? Can restitution, correction, or apology be made? By evaluating the practicality and realism of guilt, you can shift toward actionable responses, strategies for repair, self-forgiveness, and acceptance, rather than being trapped in unproductive rumination. For social media specifically, the research is clear. If social media makes you feel inadequate, counteract this by avoiding comparisons and seeking out individuals who inspire rather than upset you. Remember that many of these idealized figures are fictional, carefully constructed marketing tools designed to make you feel insufficient, so you'll buy something. The most effective strategy might be to simply refrain from engaging with harmful images altogether. You don't need to punish yourself by measuring against those who seem more productive or glamorous. Abandoning this habit won't render you lazy. Instead, trust yourself to set your own goals and pursue them at a pace that suits you, without the burden of unnecessary guilt. Here's something crucial that many people struggling with social guilt need to hear. There's a profound difference between divine approval and human approval. Many spiritual traditions recognize that the fear of man is a snare, demonstrating how the unending quest for others' approval ensnares the conscience and cultivates false guilt. Social guilt thrives on constantly weighing personal actions against the opinions of peers, friends, and society as a whole. But what if the people whose approval you're seeking are operating from their own dysfunction, insecurity, or limited perspective? When you prioritize human opinion over authentic moral principles, whether you call them divine, universal, or simply your own deepest values, you essentially hand over your moral authority to people who may not deserve it. The pathway to liberation from social guilt requires acknowledging its source, disentangling personal responsibility from external expectations, and choosing conscious self-compassion and constructive action over default submission to socially induced shame. This doesn't mean becoming selfish or abandoning all consideration for others. It means developing the wisdom to distinguish between genuine moral responsibilities and artificial guilt imposed by social comparison, manipulation, or unrealistic standards. False guilt frequently intertwines with other moral downfalls, including envy, pride, and selfishness. Social guilt can ignite a desire to imitate others or to gain recognition as being equal or superior. It shifts focus away from the inherent value of your own life and accomplishments, feeding a hunger for external validation rather than fostering satisfaction in your unique identity. Addressing false guilt often necessitates confronting these deeper inclinations, letting go of envy or pride, and redirecting attention toward meaningful, genuine standards instead of socially constructed metrics of comparison. Social guilt operates as a complex mechanism where personal conscience interacts with societal norms. It regulates behavior by connecting moral responsibility to community standards, influences decision-making, and can perpetuate emotional tension when personal desires or values conflict with societal expectations. But understanding this mechanism is the first step toward freedom. When you recognize that social guilt convinces you that you're inherently flawed, undeserving, or morally deficient, when it validates unhappiness, justifies self-punishment, and maintains attachment to negative emotional patterns, you can choose differently. And that's not it. Many studies have proven that social guilt is also associated with moral behaviors. And moreover, social guilt also have an incredible role to play in a woman's sexual desire. Interested in learning more? Then head on to the App Store or Play Store and download the Scoob app for free. Get access to the full story of social guilt with 2,000 plus similar podcasts. So, what are you waiting for?